Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Old Man Rambles. Um, One of the things I want to talk about today is the notion that everybody needs therapy. I've heard that from a lot of people, even my own kids. Um, it's like everybody should go to therapy. Everybody needs therapy, and I've thought that it's like that doesn't everybody needing therapy does not seem like a very good survival trait. It's if this many people were that if the entire human race was that maladjusted that they needed therapy, that we wouldn't have lived this long as a species. Um, and you look through history. I mean, therapy didn't exist. We obviously got by. Therapy is a relatively new concept. So I mean, we didn't always need therapy. And there are two schools of thought with this, and one of them is, well, we needed therapy, we just didn't have it. But I have a slightly different and probably not unique. Sorry, there are squirrels fighting on the tree outside. I was distracted. Squirrel! Broke my train of thought there. Anywho, I have, like I said, a different take on that, which is probably not entirely unique. And that is that we didn't need therapy because there were other things going on. Not that we didn't experience trauma, but that our lifestyle was slightly different. Our way of living was slightly different. The traumas we experienced were in some ways harsher. People died a lot more frequently. But other than that, we led lives that were somewhat more psychologically satisfying. Not just that too, but like everyone went to church. I'm speaking more from a European centric point of view. And I'm not saying you need God per se, but church was a support mechanism. You had these small communities, tight-knit communities. Everyone went to the same stores. I mean, even in the United States, in like the 1900s up to 1960s and 70s or so on, most of the country lived in small towns, or even in the cities lived in tight communities before skyscrapers became a thing. People lived in, 3, 4, 5 story apartment buildings because that's as high as they could build them before they invented skyscrapers, before they had the technology for skyscrapers. And you had everyone knew each other. You had these small little communities, either rural towns or, block areas in cities where everyone went to the same grocery stores, butcher, barbershops, bars, and churches. And I say churches because, if you have all these people going to the same locations, church being one of them, you develop a community, and that community can support you. If you need something, if a family member dies and you're part of a church group, the church will come together and help you get through it. Your priest will come and speak to you, offer, help you grieve. Families will show up, give you food, help you keep your house going, take care of your kids. If you're a woman, help you monetarily. If you're a husband, help you with food and house cleaning and stuff, because men didn't clean their homes and cook their own food. You had this, 50 to 100 people who knew you intimately and who helped take care of you when you needed help. Regardless of, like I said, whether you were in a city or a country, you had these built-in communities that were there for you physically and emotionally. Even if it wasn't, hugs and kisses, touchy-feely stuff, they were still there for you when you needed it. Even going back before early 1900s in the United States, when people lived in these small little villages, before the invention of modern technology, going back a couple hundred years, you had the same thing. You had these little towns and villages of 100 to 200 people where everyone knew each other, everyone talked to each other, people these households and these communities were interconnected. They relied on each other through feast and famine. They had regular community things that they did together. They had, you know, Beltane and Yuletide and all these holidays and stuff. The village would get together and celebrate en masse as a group these big festivities. And again, when something happened, the community came together to help you, either as an individual or if something bad happened in the entire community, like a plague. The survivors would get together and help them, and help each other. So the problem isn't so much as that we didn't need therapy, is that modern life has isolated us to the point where we have no support system. So many of us, me being an introvert, it doesn't bother me as much, but I'm in a room by myself. My wife is in the other room. Some of that's because I do these recordings. I don't want to be doing this next to the TV while she's watching stuff. But, look at, I'm working from home on a full-time basis, which means I don't see anyone but my wife. My kids are grown and moved out. I see my in-laws next door when I get the mail, or if my wife wants to visit them. But I spend probably 80% of my time by myself. I mean, my wife, in the days she works from home, she's on the other side of the table, but we're not interacting really, aside from, honey, what do you want for dinner? Do you want some tea? Can I get you a glass of water? Yada, yada, yada. We'll talk and stuff, but more perfunctorily. I mean, she is my only point of human contact for 99% of my day. Every day. Every week. There are, unless there's something going on with the family, Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays, Christmas, that sort of thing, happy hour, I spend all my time alone. My wife is the closest thing I have to a support network, and she shouldn't have to be my only means of emotional and support. But even when I worked in the office, people who work in the offices, we work in these tiny little isolated cubicles, or if you're not in a cubicle, you're in, camping land, open desk area, but you're not really working with other people. People with office jobs are stuck in their own little worlds. And while the days of Mad Men are gone, even those heavily chauvinistic days, you still had more of an office community. This open work concept to increase productivity just drains you mentally because you have no community. When my team where I work had an actual office, we used to have an office, which was an open concept. We didn't have cue walls. We had little tiny, like short cue walls that we could look over, more for like cabinets and stuff we could keep paperwork and office supplies and stuff in. It wasn't really to divide us. It was to give us a small divider in case we need to speak privately on the phone or something. But I mean, we had a dozen people in a room working together. And if I wanted to like lean over and say, hey, Rich, what are you doing? Just to say hi, we worked collaboratively in that room, and it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. And then we had to give up our office space and work, not remotely, but like, I can't remember what they called it now. But we didn't have we were roaming. It was a roaming workspace. You came in this big open room with a bunch of desks, and you just plunked one down wherever you could find one. First come, first served. And we couldn't, I didn't sit with my coworkers anymore. I just tried to find a corner where I could stay out of the way and stay out of people's sight and stuff. Because I'm an introvert and I like my privacy. But that's what we've become. You've got cities with 50-story skyscrapers with, hundreds of apartments in them, and you don't get to know your neighbors. You don't interact with them. You avoid them. You got people like me, or people who work like me, with no connection to anyone. And the reason we've become such a therapy-reliant culture is because modern society has separated us from our communities, which might seem weird coming from someone like myself, but even someone like me who doesn't really enjoy being around other people, I see the value in it. I know that being this isolated, as much as it makes me comfortable is not good for my mental health. I am well aware that my mental health is deteriorating the more time I work from home, but it's just too damn convenient. Plus my entire team works from home, so going to the office wouldn't really do me any good anyway, because most people who do my type of job do work from home full time. The only people in my company who work in the office every day are people who need to be there physically, and I would not be sitting with them because they're working in the warehouse, the R&D lab, and engineering and stuff like that, and I'm not one of those types of nerds. I'm not that smart. So I mean, I've said it, but it's my long roundabout way of saying that modern society has created the need for therapy because we're just so disconnected from other people, and mankind is a social animal. We need other people. We need that kind of support, even if it's, like I said, not the touchy-feely kind of support. We need to feel connected. We need to feel valued. An example that I read an article, and kind of what made me think of this whole thing. I read an article about a guy, a therapist, psychiatrist, who went to another country, like a third world country, talking to some tribal elder. He tried to explain what he did, that he tried to help people who were traumatized, but in some way. I was like, oh yeah, the tribal elder was like, yes, I understand. We have people like that here in our village. He said, well, the psychiatrist said, well, explain, please tell me what's going on. He said, well, there was this guy, this man in the village who stepped on a landmine that had been buried here for years, blew his leg off. He lost his leg, and he basically just sat and did nothing and just stared out in the distance for a whole year. And he was depressed. He was completely depressed, and he was just couldn't function. And the psychiatrist said, did you help him? What did you do? And the tribal elder said, we gave him a cow. The psychiatrist was like, what do you mean you gave him a cow? And he said it gave him purpose. It made him, he had to take care of this cow. He had to care for it and make sure it was fed, make sure it got to the water hole and back. It let him know that he wasn't useless, that he was still a functioning member of our village, and that his life still had value. So I mean, even these cultures where, therapy doesn't exist, this is what we did for tens of thousands of years. Our tribal elders, our shamans, our priests, what have you, our wise women, people who needed help found a way of support. When we were traumatized, the village came forward to help us. So to say that we never needed therapy, that, we've always experienced trauma. We've always reacted to trauma the same way. But for tens of thousands of years, we had a community that would help us. And modern society has destroyed that community. Online community can only help so far. Zoom meetings, Discord, gaming chat, that kind of stuff. I have found my online communities of nerds. I relished in it when I first discovered there were people like me out there, people who shared my interests and passions. But we never met in the flesh. It was all entirely chat rooms and that type of thing, like the occasional voice chat. And it's just not the same. It doesn't fill that same need as that interperson, that in the flesh communication does. And I've experienced it myself. I play online gaming all the time. And I enjoy the chats and stuff. I enjoy playing with other people when I can find people who don't boot me and who aren't jerks. But I mean, a friend of mine we had a LAN party a few months ago. We had someone from out of town come and visit us, the guy we play with online. We went to my friend's house and we had a LAN party, which sounds stupid, but we all brought our computers to his house. We set up and played. And it was far, far better to do that than our weekly gaming sessions online. I can't explain it. We need that in-person connection. And modern society is ruining it for us. And I realize I'm just armchair psychiatrying this. I'm not a professional psychiatrist. These are just my observations on how we behave as a culture and a society, and what we might need and what we might not be getting. So take that as it will. And until next time, good hunting.